What happens when the very concept of profit becomes the bottleneck to civilization? When the engines of production evolve beyond the logic of ownership? When the material cost of abundance reaches zero, but the system still insists you pay to breathe? Welcome to post-capitalist realism, the point where capitalism doesn't collapse in fire and revolution, but in quiet irrelevance, not with a bang, but with a shrug. Because the math stopped adding up. Let's start with the core concept, zero marginal cost. In classical economics, this is when producing one more unit of something costs essentially nothing. You build the system once, and from that point on, the output multiplies without proportional input. A water pipeline doesn't cost more per gallon once it's built. A digital file doesn't get more expensive to copy. A solar panel doesn't charge you extra every time it collects sunlight. Automation pushes everything toward this frontier, where human labor is no longer the limiting factor and energy becomes the baseline currency. Now, combine that with automated infrastructure, factories that run themselves, logistics that self-organize, homes that repair themselves, systems that maintain and replicate themselves without constant human input. This isn't speculative fiction. This is engineering on its natural trajectory. As machines take on more operational tasks, the cost of maintenance, repair, and reproduction sinks. And once the marginal cost reaches zero, or even close to it, profit becomes parasitic, not a driver of growth, but a tax on abundance. Profit at that stage isn't efficiency. It's extraction. It's the equivalent of building a public spring and then selling bottles of water to the thirsty while standing between them and the stream. The capitalist class becomes a toll booth on the road they didn't build, demanding tribute for permission to pass through gates that no longer need to exist. In Enlightenment socialism, we recognize that the purpose of production is liberation, not accumulation. If a technology exists that can meet human needs without harm, its ethical imperative is clear. Deploy it universally. The Enlightenment wasn't about owning ideas. It was about setting humanity free with them. The printing press, the scientific method, the abolition of divine right. These were radical acts of access. And today, we face a new threshold. Neoliberalism tells you that progress is about making things more affordable. That's the trick, because affordability still implies permission. You can have it if you earn it, if you qualify, if you pay, but when the cost of production no longer justifies the price tag, affordability becomes a scam. The only meaningful metric left is access. And access doesn't ask if you can afford it. It asks if you are alive. That's it. That's the threshold. Existence becomes entitlement. Not in the spoiled consumerist way the right wing fears, but in the raw human sense that to exist is to matter, and to matter is to deserve the tools that let you thrive. What post-capitalist realism exposes is that capitalism is not aligned with this reality. It can't be. Capitalism requires scarcity to function. If things are abundant, there's no profit. If needs are met, there's no leverage. So the system invents artificial scarcity through intellectual property, subscription models, rentier economics, supply chain throttling, and endless gatekeeping. Not because it's efficient, but because it's essential for its survival. The system needs you to need, and when you don't anymore, it panics. That's why the most disruptive force in the 21st century won't be revolution. It will be irrelevance, as decentralized automated infrastructure renders the gatekeepers obsolete. Their power crumbles not because we overthrow them, but because we stop needing them. The future isn't a war between rich and poor. It's a shift in gravitational pull. The center of economic logic moves from ownership to access, from profit to participation, from scarcity to stewardship. And this isn't some utopian fantasy. This is the pragmatic outcome of technological evolution if allowed to follow its natural path. It only becomes utopian when you assume capitalism must always exist. That's the lie post-capitalist realism breaks open. The idea that there is no alternative isn't realism, it's indoctrination. So what do we do with this knowledge? We design for abundance. We stop asking how to make things cheaper and start asking how to make them universal. We recognize that the moral framework of enlightenment, liberty, dignity, Self-determination is incompatible with a system that holds the tools of living from those who can't afford to beg for them. We reject models of progress that reward hoarding. We dismantle incentive structures that prioritize rent over renewal. We erase the question, how much does it cost? And replace it with, how many people does it free? Because in the final analysis, capitalism's goal was never progress. It was containment. It gave us just enough to keep working, consuming, and obeying. But now the machines are learning to do the work. The infrastructure is learning to sustain itself. The people are learning to see the game. And the logic of extraction no longer holds. Post-capitalist realism doesn't ask whether capitalism will survive. It asks how long we'll need to pretend to still need it. And it ends with a simple truth. When progress reaches the point where everything can be free, anything that demands a price becomes the enemy of humanity.